Welcome to the Analytics Power Hour. Analytics topics covered conversationally and sometimes with explicit language. Here are your hosts, Mo, Michael, and Tim.
Hey everybody, it's the Analytics Power Hour, and this is episode 211. Hey, you got a minute? I've been thinking about my career, and I think it might be time to make a change. And it's a tricky topic, so I just wanted to chat with a few people that I really trust about it. Do you mind if I pick your brain a little? Obviously, please keep this episode confidential. I don't want my boss to find out before I'm ready to have that discussion. Hey, Tim, you're the quintessential analyst, and you and I have had this conversation over the last 10 years many, many times. Are you okay to chat about this a little bit?
I mean, it's so funny. This was not a topic I suggested, and it's definitely the most timely for me. So,
perfect.
Yeah.
And Mo, you're right kind of at the nexus of the kind of the latest trends in both like people leadership and data and analytics. Are you willing to jump in on this conversation too?
I'm willing to jump in, but the nexus of people leadership and analytics, I mean, I don't know if I'm in that place, but sure.
He's testing out more shit like it's going to be the quintessential analyst. He's workshopping stuff,
true.
And it's going to be coming out.
Look, okay, first off, I didn't know we were going to start with this.
Hey, you're the Nexus analyst.
No, it's Mo, like, look at your interests. Like, you're a people leader of a fast-growing team and a fast-growing company with doing the latest things in analytics. So you're up on the current trends and the latest things that are happening in the industry. You're a huge fan of people like Adam Grant and Brene Brown, just like me. And so, like, that's the nexus. That's the intersection. I'm sorry.
It is.
Like, that's analytics leadership. I don't know what you want me to say.
Right there. Summarized it well.
I got it right. So anyways, I know I picked the right two people to talk to about this. Honestly, I feel
like, Michael, your team's now like, oh, shit, what's going on?
Oh, yeah.
I thought we were doing great.
Yeah, well, I mean, just what can I say? We tried it, and I'm just looking for something new.
They heard it here first.
But just
that's right.
For our listeners, a little bit of context.
Yeah, great.
Part of the reason that we were inspired to do this show is because I have I guess it seems like a myriad of analysts at all different levels, from like junior to mid to senior, people managers who are kind of starting to have lots of conversations with me. And I seem to very regularly be having these conversations with people who are just like, I don't know what to do next with my career. Like, I don't know what the next step is. I don't know if I should go down like a more senior technical IC route. I don't know if I need to move companies. I don't know if I should be like going into a manager position. And it's this conversation. I seem to be having them, I would say, at least monthly. And what we wanted to talk through is a little bit of our own experiences with this, but also, I guess delve a little bit deeper into it. And it's something I'm really passionate about helping people figure out what they should do next.
So I feel like, was I the last person who came to you that wanted to have that conversation?
No, not even the last.
And you're like, damn it, we should record this. I'm sick and tired of having these and not having them on tape.
No, I love these conversations though, because it is so much about figuring out what makes people thrive at work. And like, yes, I know superpower is such a corny word that everyone hates, but I love it. It really is about helping people figure out what their superpower is and what's going to make them feel really fulfilled and thrive at work. And that's why I love these conversations.
Well, and I think it is such a broad. I think we've had this discussion before as well. Like, analytics can go in many, many different directions, and the industry is changing super rapidly. So if like, and again, I'll put myself in it. I know that I am in the right industry for me. Looking back over my career, there were points where I know I want to be growing. I know this stuff is interesting me. I have pretty much stumbled along organically and just followed what I've found interesting, and then found time to do that. And that's kind of evolved into the next role in a way. But if I look at what I know and what I do and how I do it and compare it to the me from 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it is completely different. So I think that's the first question. Like, do you like, or do you want to stay in the field? Like, because I do think there are people, that's a tough question. There are times where they're like, oh, wait a minute. I liked the idea of data and analytics and what I thought it was, but boy, I really don't like, the data's always so messy. Like, I just want to work somewhere where the data's not so messy. It's like, well, I'm not sure this is the right field. The data's always going to be
to be
messy,
honest, it's also the one that I've had is people who started out, because like lots of people, like young people now are starting out in like computer science and that sort of stuff with what I would say like more full stack or like traditional back end skills, who end up migrating to data. And I did have one person that I was kind of helping through this that was like, actually, I love data and I really love what I do, but I like the way that work is done as an engineer, as a software engineer, in terms of like, I like getting tickets that are scoped by a product manager. Like, I struggle with the ambiguity or whatever it is. And so for various reasons made the decision. It's not, I don't like data. It's like, I like this other thing and the other ways of working around this thing better.
Yeah. Which I mean, and I think the leap, a lot of for me, and I've also, the other direction to come from is people who come from the business and they gravitate to the data, which means they arrive in the analytics world with kind of, I think, business acumen a lot of times, and they had stumbled along and in the fringes had been trying to use data to do things and said, wait a minute, wouldn't my life be much more fun if I was supposed to be doing that as my full-time job? But those are the ones who I think come in and they're like, wait a minute, I wasn't necessarily signing up to learn Python or R or SQL, maybe. And I think that from the digital analytics world, it seems like people came a lot more from that. And I think there are people who are mid-career saying, wait a minute, do I have to learn this stuff? And then I think you're absolutely the people who come from kind of a computer science or some sort of programming background. It is very different, and when they meet up, it's, do you want to keep pushing into that other area?
I get the sense for people who make those transitions from like analytics to other things is sort of like a kind of lacking the sort of the hand on the tiller sort of thing of like being directly responsible for the thing that's happening or running it, because a lot of times analytics ends up being a highly advisory.
They move because they want to do stuff.
Yeah, so be more directly connected to like what's happening. So I've seen a lot of people I've worked with in the past go from analytics roles into like digital leadership roles or e-commerce roles and even product management roles where, they're sort of like, okay, I want to move to where I feel like I'm actually directly impacting it as opposed to being in this capacity where I'm trying to influence the action, but I'm not actually the actor.
Yeah, the owner of the decision. I can
understand that.
You're trying to influence a decision, but you're not ultimately the decision maker.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty valid. Some people, struggle with, that disconnect between those things.
If on the other hand, you're more comfortable saying, I'd like to crunch the data and piss and moan about how they're not making decisions with it, like you are long-time career track analytics person.
Welcome.
And Michael, you had made a comment when we were discussing this as a topic about the, running to what's next as opposed to running away from where you are.
Yeah.
Now.
Since I've made a number of job transitions in my career and I try to evaluate and think about every single one of them. And I remember distinctly when I moved on from Land's End back to Rosetta before I went to Search Discovery, realizing that the reasons I left that company were primarily because of some of the dissatisfaction I had with various things, certain things. All those things are past, and that's a great company, really great people, and not a bad word to say about anybody there. But at the time, there was a couple things that I, was not particularly happy with. And I realized that a lot of my choices were driven by what I was trying to get away from versus what I wanted next. And as I came to that realization, it really helped me be thoughtful. Because I think one of the things I feel like is really important for people to realize is a lot of the things we find as problems in our jobs, in our life, are usually problems with us, that we actually have a lot more control over than we realize. Not everything, right? But like our reactions to things, how we respond to things, like we have a lot of growing we can personally do. And so I basically made a commitment to myself, and I said, I'm not going to quit a job ever again when it's because I'm leaving. I want to only quit when I'm pursuing something I think is greater or better than what I've got and I can't do here, or whatever the case may be, right? And so I tried to just commit myself to that. And it was really hard because, you know, when I left Search Discovery to start my own company, it took me months of processing and trying to think through and really thinking about, and actually sort of like making sure I was really making that choice from that position always. And not that there were things, again, like, it's because I really liked working at Search Discovery. It made it like a really tough decision, but it was sort of like, okay, why is it? And at the same time, it made me feel like, okay, I made a very wise decision at the end of the day, and it was the right one for me. And I think SDI has gone on to continue to grow and be excellent. So it looks like it's working out great for them too. So that sort of frames up where it's like, okay, good. That was a good separation. That worked well for everybody. And so that's kind of been my mentality. And so it's like a personal journey though. It's sort of like, I've got problems. Every job has problems. Like every job has stuff you don't like about it. So it's less about sort of like letting that be your reason than sort of like, what am I going to do in the future? And how does this next thing I'm going to pursue map to that? So yeah. That's sort of been my own journey.
I think what's really nice about that, that perspective or that commitment you made to yourself, it stops you from making a rash decision of like, I just need to get out of where I'm at. These are the 4 jobs that are available, so I'm going to choose from those 4 versus like, I think what I have found has been really successful both for myself and people that I've kind of coached or mentored through a transition like this is being really purposeful about what you do want your next role to be like, and then seeking that out versus or even creating it for yourself versus these are the 5 jobs that are available on LinkedIn, and so I'm just going to apply for these 5, and whichever one I get first that meets, like, that has the best offer, I'm going to take. Like, I have done that previously, and it led to me not lasting very long at a company because I was miserable.
I mean, I'll maybe provide I don't know that it's directly in conflict with that, but I do think during my career, there have been points where I have realized that something structural about the company is, I mean, yeah, it is draining me psychologically, which actually means really hard to spend evenings or weekends thinking about what's next. And I think there's a lot of value in saying, what is it that's like structurally about this company, which is not a knock on the company at all. It is, that's not what I want to do. So I think there's a part where it's like, I'm going to leave that behind because we are not or are no longer a fit. My interests and what I do enjoy is not aligned with what that organization is. That is their strategy for growing and thriving. And if those don't align, then it's like, well, what I need to do next is definitely don't pick one of the jobs that's going to have the exact same issues. I mean, I've sort of figured out kind of the general sort of scale of a company that I enjoy. Like, outside of financial straits, I'm not going to work for a massive organization. I just know that I won't do that. I mean, because I have done it and it's been fine and I've grown from it, but that's not for me. So I think it's not quite running away from, but it's a little bit of saying, look, I'm not going to be the one who's going to change the organization's strategy, and they shouldn't change it for me. It's just time to move on.
So, but I want to ask a clarifying question. When you mentioned that, I guess that in my world, I see it like a disconnect between either the company values or the way they operate, or the way they operate in light of their values, whatever you want to call it, and what I personally, the type of company I want to work for. Were you saying that when you've experienced that disconnect between those two things, you found it difficult to find the mental space to think about what you want to do next. Is that what you find?
Yeah, because I think I'm like a lot of analysts. I can't mail it in. Like quite my best effort to quiet quit. I mean, it's just like what would not happen.
You're a pathetic quiet quitter. Yeah, you can never be able to pull it off.
So I think that's. Yeah, so it's just like it's that becomes draining. I think recognizing like it's draining and I don't think that it's always like, well, no, I just need to bluntly like change my attitude or change my way or inspect my emotions and make it work. No, there are lots of it should be healthy that some people fit well at an organization at one time and no longer fit as they grow their careers and as the company evolves. I mean, Search Discovery has actually, I mean, they have said that multiple times. Even like when Michael left, it was like, yeah, that's life. Like that's not that anybody has done anything wrong, but I think it still becomes the question is, what should I do next is the question. And it shouldn't be, well, I want to not work there and I want to not have that manager and not have that coworker. That's not really helpful. It's only helpful to the point of saying, why? What is it structurally about that?
To me, it's helpful in that determining it's time to leave, but that shouldn't determine what your next step is.
And then that gets into the next piece, which is, what do you construct or how do you go through that evaluation process? Which honestly is starting to remind me of the Katie Bauer episode because I felt like she did such a cool job of that. But actually, Mo,
we're just going to be the touchy-feely. I don't know what you guys have done to me. You know what? What I want to do in a podcast next is get back to talking about analytics. Not this
we are talking about analytics
well,
careers.
What we do, Tim, is we set up a Shiny app in R to evaluate all of our career options. No. No, but to me, like that's exactly the process I went through. Was sort of like first figure out, is this time, and then second, well, then what? And that was a whole process of its own as well. Like the reason I did what I did, I had other options, and everybody in analytics has options. I always say that you always have a choice, and that's also really scary. Just to get it off my chest, like the fact that we could all go get jobs somewhere else so easily is kind of a problem in a way because it lets us run from the truth sometimes.
It's a privilege. I actually think it's like
that's a good way to say
privilege.
It's a privilege. Yeah. And like if we were in other industries or we existed 50 to 100 years ago, there's no such thing as the kind of mobility we have in our careers. So it is something it's a really big privilege to have it. And at the same time, it's sort of like, well, how do I not replicate the mistakes of the past out into the future? And so, I went through and I basically thought of the kinds of work I wanted to do that mapped to what I thought I was best at and fit my personality and me best. And I mapped out 15 years. And I said, which of these options that I think I could see myself doing would be the best choices for me and the best utilization, the best in terms of my economic utility, if you will, in the marketplace.
Well, good for you. I haven't even mapped out 15 weeks. Like that's
Yeah, did I?
Well, again, it's not going to come true. Like it's not good numbers. It's just useful to think about. Like, okay, I've probably got 15 more years of work in me. Before I maybe go to something a little less full time. I'm not going to ever stop working. I don't see myself. I'll do something for some way. I just like working so much, so it'll be fine. But I won't do it like I do it now. But it was sort of like, okay, then in that vein, here's the 3 things or here's the 4 things I could see myself doing or pursuing. And what would it look like to do that? What are the real expectations of that?
I think helps. The problem is
some
people don't know that though. They don't know what the 3 or 4 options are. And
totally fair.
That step is actually, I think, the most difficult.
That's totally fair.
What are the options available to me? Like I had someone come to me not long ago that was like, I don't know what's out. Like I don't know what I don't know. And I'm also like, well, I'm sure as shit not going to tell you because you need to figure this out for yourself.
Step one, learn about yourself. Learn about who you really are, what you really enjoy, and those kinds of things. Because the amount of dishonesty we apply to ourselves, I speak from personal experience because I did this for years and years and years, is astounding. we buy a lot of lies to ourselves because we want to appear a certain way, we want to achieve a certain salary, we want to whatever those things are. Like we've onboarded some opinions about what we ought to be, and it takes a long time to get rid of those. And the more you can cut through some of that and figure out who you really are, that's the most important starting point for this process, I think. Sorry, Mo, you were going to say something.
I don't even think, though, it's about... I don't know. I feel like that was very heavy, which I'm totally comfortable with. But I think the bit sometimes is the lies that we tell ourselves are the skills, the things that we need to develop. And so I don't remember if I've told everyone this at some point as an anecdote, but James Hayes, the internal coach at Canva, who I adore, who's been a previous guest, he helped me through this whole coaching journey where I kept setting these technical goals and I kept failing at them and like not doing them. And at one point he really challenged me. He's like, Mo, do you actually want to do this technical stuff? Like, is it actually important to you? And when it really boiled down was like, I thought I should be doing it. I thought I should be spending 5 hours a week on my technical craft, but I didn't want to. I didn't actually genuinely enjoy it as much, or I didn't see it as valuable as maybe I might have 5 years ago, or whatever the case. And really acknowledging that changed my perspective, because then I was like, I'm actually going to use that 5 hours to do the thing that I do think is going to help me next. But it's that, like, yeah, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to
kind of admit it.
But I feel like it's like, I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of the same. It's not like this capital K, capital T, know thyself. I mean, maybe for the Michaels of the, I mean, I think there are people out there who can maybe,
it's a journey, right?
Kind of sit and introspect that way. I think there's a much simpler, like as you described it, like Mo, if you literally at the end of the day had said, what was I excited to do? What sucked the life out of me? Like that's,
yeah,
that like I have had to grapple with, like, you throw me any dumb little thing that could be coded or scripted in R, and it is amazing what stuff's supposed to get done that will get done later.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm going to gravitate to that.
That's awesome.
So I've got to square that with, am I going to go and develop packages? No. Like Mo, you've got kind of your framework of kind of like the 4 buckets of like the questions to ask yourself, I think is like a really structured way to try to figure that out and try to figure out where you don't have answers. And that focuses what you're, now that I've just referred to it, I feel like you need to probably explain it before I speak in the abstract.
So I actually used this, and the funny thing is that's why I asked a clarifying question earlier about whether you've felt so like overwhelmed that you didn't have space to think, because there's an exercise I've been doing with quite a few people that have been coming to me about this, and I'm really happy to share. I've got a template that I use now with people who kind of present with this situation and want to talk it through. And you basically bucket, like, what are the things I like doing? And yes, you should include your hobbies. Lots of people are like, why am I including my hobbies? I'm like, because they're things you enjoy doing. And if you can overlap that, that's great. But it will also give you insight into things that you might not have thought about. So what do I like doing? And include your hobbies. What do I avoid doing? What am I good at? And what can I get paid for? Now, I actually was really cheeky. And when I was doing a career transition, I put this up on a huge mirror in my dining room. It actually sat up there for weeks. And I had a stack of Post-it notes and pens. And anyone that came into my house, I pointed to it and said, if you want to add a Post-it, I'd love it. There is no pressure, but like, feel free to add something if you like. My husband put some very entertaining Post-its up that I then had to scrap. But yeah,
there had to be a rating applied to them.
Yes, they were definitely R-rated. But the summary is, at the end, you want to then try and find a role that minimizes the things that you avoid doing, because there's obviously a reason you avoid doing them, right? Like, I don't know, maybe it's process, maybe it's I don't like writing up my findings, or like whatever it is. But then the key is to look for intersectionality, or like a Venn diagram of the things you like doing, what are you good at, and what can you get paid for. And that I just find sometimes having those
Can you put the same thing on 2 Post-it notes? Can you put something in the what do I like doing and what can I get paid for? Okay, so you can. It's fine to say.
Yeah.
And that probably should be a little light bulb going off in your head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that the really nice thing about this is that it often helps with that jump from like, what should I do next? I don't even know what the options are, to like, oh, these are the 5 options because this matches up with this and that matches up with that. And like, then people can help you. Like, you can even go to them and be like, here are the things I like doing. These are the things I'm good at. These are the things I can get paid for. What like marries up with this? And you can use your network to be like, maybe it's a data product manager role. Maybe it's that I want to be a senior IC at a smaller company. Like, you can then use your network to be like, what are the 4 or 5 things that would potentially fit this?
Yeah, I think it's also useful to abstract it out as much as you can. So in other words, if you say like you have a Post-it note that says like what I like doing things in R, abstract that out to I like solving problems with computer code or those kinds of things. Because if you start abstracting it out, it broadens your ability to kind of evaluate a lot of different things. Because when I was doing that process, but not nearly as organized as you, Mo, which I think is hilarious. Because
surprising
it's like,
no one?
No, I was surprising everyone. I'm not an organized person.
I have a method, but I never think to ever templatize it or create a structure around it. That's one of the things I know about myself. But in doing that, I was like, wow, I really enjoy helping people learn new things. And I started applying that to like, well, what was it that I do? I do this, I do that, I do this. And I was like, wow, that's actually why I like doing sales and business development, because a lot of times the people I encounter in that process have this frustration and inability to see how these solutions are going to work for them. And if I'm good at explaining how we're going to be able to come in and help, it actually lightens their load. It's helpful. And I was like, wow, that makes me feel better about doing that process, which is something that's like, I don't feel like I'm a salesperson, but it's like, wow, that is actually something I enjoy about the sales process as a consultant. And so it's sort of like that idea. And that's why I say abstract it out, because then you can find these little spots in lots of different things of like, you enjoy that, you see you're good at it, and you can see how you apply yourself in a lot of different ways. And it can really help kind of give you some joy in areas that are sort of mundane. Because like one of the things we aren't talking about is sort of like, I do think there are necessaries in work, right? That's why they call it work, is that the phrase is like, not everything is like all happy all the time. And so like there is some of that you got to deal with. Okay, you're rubbing your hands together, Tim. So go.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna pull a Mo and do the like. I'm gonna get my personal
anecdote,
personal consultation on the topic. So throw this out, because this happened to me a few jobs ago, and then it happened again somewhat, not as exclusively the most recent job, the exact same thing of like, what am I good at? And I think, Michael, the abstraction, like, you know what, I'm good at making slide decks, and I can abstract that to I'm pretty good at explaining things.
You're great at explaining things.
Do I like doing it? To a point. I don't like it as the core of what I do. Like in my most recent role, I feel like the last few months of the role, it was like all I was doing was going through, frankly, like reviewing and trying to improve not great decks. And it was killing me trying to figure out what I want to not be doing that. I enjoy the speaking at conferences, developing things for clients where I'm trying to explain this is what we're doing with the, Bayesian time series, modeling. I enjoy, but I'm trying to wrap my head around how to abstract that, because I had in a previous role, I got moved into a new position, and they explained it to my peers as I was going to be in more of a thought leadership role. And one of my peers was like, what does that even mean? And my boss said, well, Tim makes really good slide decks. And I was like, and I'm out. I mean, that was the shortest. I was at that job for 9 months total.
Can I ask a clarifying question? When I think of that particular skill set that you have, like, you are an exceptionally good communicator of technical concepts, but is part of the reason that those few months, like, you weren't enjoying it is because, like, to me, this is like my observation is like, you like explaining technical concepts that you have found or worked out for yourself, not trying to explain someone else's work. And was part of that like few months of pain, like you were trying to explain someone else's stuff, which you might not have had that aha moment, or you might not have been as passionate about, or like you're reviewing other people's shit.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's probably, and maybe that's it. It was something where I'm like, I wound up having to learn shit I didn't care about so that I could try to help them explain it better, because it made no sense. And that turned out to, and I think it was also, I was to a point, I like coaching people on how to do that. And that's the other piece of like, if I give somebody a tip and they're like, great, got it, and run with it. If I give somebody a tip and they're like, great, got it, and then drop the ball, and then I give them the same tip again, and they're like, great, run. Then I tell them, watch this fucking video, never do that again, and they do it again, then I want to throw, something through a wall. So, okay.
The idea that I come back to, or I look for, and I do this all the time, like in an interview process or when talking to people about career, is I try to hone in on where they spark, where their passion sparks up. When they start talking about something they like to do and I see it flare up there, like that's what I'm looking for and listening for, and always, because as a hiring manager, I'm always trying to figure out what they're excited about, and do we fit? Is there a mutual excitement that we can feed on, we can build on together? Like that's so cool to see that. And the same thing in the pursuit of that. And then, like, there's the classic, was it Marie Kondo, that was like, this sparks joy or whatever, like that kind of idea. And in a certain sense, Tim, like as you're talking, like there's a couple things about this that when you present things at a conference or within a company, the connection is with you sharing and giving enablement of that topic to a group of people. So, like, the idea of thought leadership is sort of like Tim spews smart stuff into the void. Like, not exciting. But Tim sits down with 3 or 4 amazingly smart up-and-coming analysts, and you could go all day and all night. I've watched you. Like, and that's the thing is, like, so that's the spark is when I'm able to do this with a group of people that I see the potential, I see the excitement, I see the opportunity, that gets me going, and I love it, and I like to do it. And so that's when you're looking at career, that's the thing you're looking for is like, where did the spark come from? What specific thing was it? It's like, I think part of why you love learning so many new things is so that you can effectively teach those things. And the way you effectively teach it is through participation in a process of like sharing that in different ways. And it comes out all these different ways. And your preparation and excellence in terms of public speaking and those kinds of things is just hooked into that passion. And that's like, I'm going to do a great job with this because I care so much that people understand this and get something from it. And every time you talk about a talk you're going to give, you invariably will talk about, did I put things in this talk that people are going to be able to get from this? Am I giving them good information they can actually hold on to? So you're naturally trying to teach in a certain sense. It's
like the excitement of I got it. I want to help someone else get it.
And so that's the thing is like we can boil this down into like a nice like molasses of like very general things. But that's the nice thing is it can be applied to any recipe then. Because now you can go do a lot of different things and see where that little piece of it fits. And that's what I mean by like learning about yourself. And I think everybody's capable of that journey. I'm nobody special, I don't think.
Yeah, and those were going on about me and one possible skill way beyond my comfort level. But so I want to ask another tip from Mo, whether intentional or not. This is why I think, Mo, you are at the nexus of the latest trends in both people leadership and analytics.
I don't lie. I just tell it like I see
it. But another thing, Mo, when we were having it was a while back, we were having the discussion, and you were like, why don't you just sit down and instead of like going through job postings out there, like I had somebody, the former colleague had a friend who'd gotten laid off as part of a cutback, and they reached and he made the introduction, and that guy was like, should I go into data engineering, data analytics, financial? I mean, super nice guy, very, very good question. And I wound up in this world of like, well, these job titles are kind of hard to decipher, so it sounds like what you should do. But Mo, you told me, this was quite a while back, where you were like, you should just like write your ideal job description, knowing that, I mean, Michael, to your point, you're not going to
tell you that.
You're not going to get that. You did tell me to do that, and that was
awesome.
And it was, which I think it's fine to go and actually grab some existing job postings, but like, okay, fine, grab it, but delete the company name and the job title. That doesn't matter. Just use those bullet points and figure out which of those you would put on your, I mean, I almost feel like you could take that and go through the same exercise of saying, I mean, these are things I could get paid for, except for the bullshit like excellent communication skills. Like, no, but if it's a well-written job description, go through it and say, which of these are all things I could get paid for. Which of these would actually spark joy, or what I want to do, or I'm good at it, or what I want to learn to do. I think you have to be careful with the ones that said, I'd like to be doing that, because that's where we start telling ourselves lies. But I think that was a really useful exercise. I remember spending a few hours kind of trying to work through that, and that was actually super illuminating.
So this is part of my evil thing that everyone's working out about me. When people ask me for a salary increase, they ask me for career advice, or they want to like go for a promotion, the first thing I do is give them homework. And part of it is you need to care about this more than I do. Like, this is your career. This is your salary increase.
Yeah.
You need to show me that you're going to put in effort to thinking about this. And then I will 100% like support you along the way. But this is on you to change, not me to change for you.
I like that a lot.
I also love that we got Tim to say spark joy in an episode. I can't believe that just happened.
Well, the funny thing is, like, literally, as I was moving some stuff around in the house, I found the Marie Kondo book, and it sparked the thought, and it came up with my daughter, and I was like, so that book we got, I never looked at it. I'm pretty sure it's not sparking. I was like, what happens if you actually hold the Marie Kondo book and it doesn't spark joy and you throw it out? Like, what does a black hole open up somewhere?
It's this joy singularity.
So I literally, that was like 2 days ago, I was having that discussion with my daughter.
Yeah, they just did that fusion experiment a little while back in California. So I guess we'll find out in a couple years.
So one thing I do want to touch on is that, so we've talked a little bit about like figuring out what the right time is to make a move, or how you know that it's the right time, like that exploration is of what the next steps are. And then you often get to a place where you're like, right, I know that I have these 4 or 5 options available, or whatever the case may be. Maybe you've started interviewing, you've started exploring. Tim, I actually really like the idea of writing that job description as well, because the other thing you can do is go back during an interview process and be like, hey, I want to be open with you. This is the type of role I'm looking for. Does this align with what you guys have in mind? Because this whole movement at the moment about like people kind of misadvertising what a role really truly is, especially in the data space, because people are so desperate, that it's like it's an opportunity for you in the interview process to really figure out if the role that they're advertising is actually going to align with what you want. But one of the other techniques that I have actually used myself and I've used with other people is like, once you have some options and you're not sure what to do, is to list out all the things that are important to you. I did this for myself. I had things like, for me, I know company values, and whether a company actually lives those values is really important to me. And I know lots of people, it's like not on their radar. For me, that's probably almost one of my biggest driving factors when making a decision about joining a company. Things about like the culture, whether I have people to learn from is really important to me. And so I list all these things out, and then I actually create like a matrix and I score each of my options. And the truth of the matter is, this is so subjective. You could put like one thing as a 1 and one thing as a 5 because you have a personal preference for it, but it's going to help give you personal confidence about your choice, which sometimes I think it's the indecision or the uncertainty that's really scary when you're making a move. And so if you're able to find a way as a data person to be like, right, I really care about the data maturity of the organization I'm going to. This one, I'm ranking a 1. This one, I'm ranking a 5. It gives you some framework to help you make a decision.
It's basically how we land on podcast topics too.
Yes.
So
yeah,
it's great.
True.
Just a little voting process.
But I think there's a piece to that too that like deep down, and I don't. This is, I can't remember where I read it or heard it, and I'm sure it's been around and one of you will remember it, but it's like if you go through this very disciplined sort of scoring and you're like, but wait, I really wanted to work I thought I wanted to work at the other company, but this didn't work. But the coin flip decision making, where you can't make a decision and then you flip a coin, and really it doesn't matter what you're not going to go with what the coin flip says. It's what you're rooting for while the coin is in the air, as a way to sort of pay attention.
That's cool. Exactly what this is doing, except with 4 or 5 options. Because if the option that you really deeply do prefer comes out lower, you're going to find a way to like tweak the scores, or to be like, oh, well, that thing isn't really like that, and so I probably shouldn't consider it. And so you're going to find a way. But what it's going to do is...
But it may be a clue that you're lying to yourself.
Yeah,
right?
totally. 100%.
Yeah.
And it will help give you confidence about the uncertainty, or like call out the fact that maybe you are lying to yourself.
I feel like since I can see it, and don't worry, I'm not going to list the companies on Mo's personal evaluation unless I did, and we could see how much money, Josh, or I could extract from you to not have it go out. But like your list, Mo, was like company values, culture, diversity, flexibility, newness tasks, likable tools, business knowledgeable boss, a data knowledgeable boss. Like those two are big ones. Like, do you want somebody who knows more about data? I think we've even talked about the data maturity, the coworkers to learn from, the pay, the benefits, so those sorts of things are like, that's like the level, just to make it a little, I mean, it's easy because we're kind of sitting there looking at it, but coming up with like 10 or 15 things to say, these are things that I do care about and I want, and now let me kind of analytically assess the different companies, which I assume could be companies that you have an offer in hand, but it can also be companies that you're just considering pursuing, right? Like,
going after,
And like you could add anything on here. Like one thing that I would probably add now if I was looking tomorrow is like pay equity. Like in Australia, companies over a certain size have to produce an annual report on pay and promotion equity, and that's all publicly available. And I do typically go through those reports before I say yes to a company. But it's like I would actually put that on there now in my like scoring matrix, and I would go through and say like, what are they doing about pay equity? Because there are like multiple different steps, because that is something that I know is personally important to me, and it's really hard to fight if they haven't made any progress on it, versus a company that's, maybe 7/10 of the way there might be a better indicator of somewhere that I'm going to more closely align with like their values and what they're prioritizing.
So you got all your answers, Tim? You good?
I do. I was like, I haven't heard a more pregnant pause ready for a wrap in ever.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then the last thing you could also do is you can also just make a job offer to yourself and go start your own thing, which is exactly what I did.
Yes, but I know it's meant to be yes, but do you know I love that Aaron and Rodney's podcast recently, she said yes, but instead of yes, and I was like, you are my kindred spirit. But anyway, the issue I do have with that, when I was going through a career transition, everyone is like, Mo, you should start your own thing. Like, you are so the person to do that. And I did actually listen to a bit of peer pressure. And the truth is, I absolutely hated it, because
I think it's important to know what you're getting into.
Well, I hated the business development. I hated the selling side. I hated working on my own, like all these things. And look, it wasn't a bad experience because I figured those things out. I was like, I never want to start my own company. That's not for me. But I do think you need to be really careful about, like, this is where it's like you have to be honest with yourself and not just listen to the voices around you.
Yeah. It takes a lot of introspection.
I will say that it has happened twice, and this is my third attempt, that I have actually left a company thinking that I was going to just kind of breathe for a little bit and figure out what to do next and just take that risk on. I mean, it's nice to be a dual income household where I can do that. So far, I've been batting 0 on successfully doing that by the time I've left. I think this time I'm going to pull off the nope, I'm taking a breath and going to, see what happens. But that has been it's also like at a certain point in the career, like it is a case where when I do feel like no, I need to breathe I need to have 4 or 5 hours a day that I can dabble and think about some stuff where I still have that energy. So that'll be my...
Take a breath. Enjoy Super Week. It's in a couple days.
Coming up, a couple days.
And let's wrap this up. This is actually a really great conversation. I'm really glad that we talked about it, and I feel a lot better. Thank you. All right. One thing, and again, please, let's keep this between all of us, okay? For now. Anyways, one thing we like to do is go around the horn and share something that might be of interest to everybody. Let's do a last call. Mo, why don't you kick us off today? What's your last call?
Well, I need to do a shout out to one of the guys on my team, Jago, who shared this with me. And it did take me a little while to get around to reading it. But when I did, I was like, oh, I get why he shared it with me. This is so my thing. It's an article called Means and Ends, When What Matters Most is Hardest to Measure, by Michelle Joy Lowe. She's a PhD, head of data and AI at Reese Group. It is a phenomenal article which talks about success metrics for data teams, but also, I guess, the responsibility or the complexity, let's say, when, and I mean, we talked about it in this exact episode, right? Where a software team ships something, they've done it, tick, right? But with a data team, often the way we measure success is a lot harder, because it's like, okay, well, if something goes wrong with, say, an insight that's gathered, or a business decision maker makes a crappy decision, like, where does our responsibility end and start? As like, okay, we might have been up late trying to get something out to someone urgently. Maybe someone's misinterpreted the data. They've made a crappy decision. Like, and what she's really talking about is the fact that sometimes, as a result of this complexity in the data world, we end up choosing ways to measure our success that are we pick the things that are easy to measure, right? So like, we shipped this, we did this.
A little bit.
Yeah. And basically, like, anything that falls in the too hard basket, we just don't worry about. And she's kind of advocating for a different way of thinking about it. And so how do we actually create ways to measure things that are measuring the things that actually matter? And there's a whole bunch of stuff about culture and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, it's totally my vibe. I highly recommend it. It's on the datafuturology.com blog, and I'll share it in the show notes. But there's a bunch of interesting concepts in there about like choice architecture. And anyway, I'm still wrapping my head around it. I've got like 1,000 more thought bubbles to have on it. So thank you, Jago, for sharing it with me.
Nice. All right.
Nice.
Well, Tim, what about you? What's your last call?
Well, I am looking forward to seeing some loyal listeners in a few days at Super Week. It's probably too late to plug Super Week and have anybody, but hey, I don't have no idea if there's still even spots open, but if you're listening to this when it comes out and you can get a ticket to Budapest, hop on. But that's not my last call. So I don't know if you're familiar with this thing called ChatGPT. No, I'm not going to do a last call. It is not going to be my take on ChatGPT. There are
I was going to say, did you have ChatGPT write you a last call? Because that would be hilarious.
I had it right. Yeah, write me a last call for the Analytics Power Hour. What's funny is that sort of two things hit, and this was one of them is a book called The Verifiers by Jane Peck, and I've been kind of looking to find my next kind of fiction writer to kind of get into, which is funny. Maybe don't read the first and only book from an author is not necessarily a good strategy for that. And I would even say, I'm not sure I would totally recommend the book. I don't know that I loved the writing, but the premise of it was around dating applications and basically bots being fake things within it. And it's funny and it's a fun read. But then somewhat more recently, still a little while back, the Endless Thread podcast has done a multi-part series on bots, kind of casting a broad net around bots. And part 5 was good bot, bad bot. Part 5, dating bots. And so they actually dug into the use of bots in dating applications, both as kind of coaches for people who are using dating applications to kind of help them get to a date by giving them like suggested prompts for how to have an interaction. It's funny. It came out after ChatGPT like had kind of blown up in the in the ether, and they did not really acknowledge it at all. But I mean, just gives you a sense of their production time. I was surprised they didn't throw a little extra piece in front, but they did talk about GPT-3. So those two, having never been on a dating app, and I have no expectations of ever being on a dating app. I wish I could remember whether swipe left or swipe right is supposed to be the good one to just make pop culture references. But those two kind of came together, and it was kind of interesting. I do enjoy people's takes on like, what does this stuff mean? And like with the stuff GPT-3 has been doing, it was just interesting to me. There was a fiction book that came out last year. There was a podcast, and it would not have occurred to me at all that sort of generative AI stuff would be playing in the world of Match.com. So it's kind of interesting. It's back to my long-winded stemwinder last calls. Michael, what have you got?
Well, as luck would have it, I recently got into this paper that was written. It was actually written back in 2020. It's called Closing the AI Accountability Gap, Defining an End-to-End Framework for Internal Algorithmic Auditing. And I was reading through it, and I guess probably because of like GPT, but also the show that we recently did with Renee Cummings, which I really enjoyed. It just been a topic on my mind. But I liked the paper in that they did a very nice job. It was one of the authors is Timnit Gebru, who, as of this paper, is dating it a little bit. She was still at Google at the time, so that didn't last. But I know she's still in this field. So there's a lot of great authors that work together.
Was this the paper that wound up? Did she?
I don't know enough about it. I don't know, so I shouldn't. Anyways, the point is they lay out a really nice framework to think about how to evaluate an AI and give roles to both internal and external teams to sort of think through how to think about how you do this, from how you think of the scope of the AI and the mapping, and how you collect artifacts, and how you test it, and how you reflect on it, and then what to do about it. So I just like that they thought through this process. They brought some ideas from lots of other fields and things like that. So I felt like it was just really good read. I enjoyed it. It was really helpful, and it's got me thinking a lot about, our future is definitely going to interact with AI more and more. And I want to be on the side of really thinking about it ahead of time before I sort of let it sweep me away into places I never wanted to go or be a part of. So I thought that's pretty cool. Anyways, we'll put the link to that in the show notes as well. As you've been listening, hey, maybe you're not thinking about a job change, or maybe you are, but we'd love to hear from you. And the best way to do that is through the Measure Slack group, or on Twitter, or on LinkedIn. So, reach out. We're happy to chat a little bit and talk. And if you got other ideas for the show, we'd love to hear those. And if you like the show, why not throw us a rating or a review on one of them apps that you listen to it on, whatever those are. Because now it used to be like, on, Apple, but really now it's like Spotify and it's Google and everybody else.
You're such an Android person. You had trouble saying Apple, I feel like.
Apple.
I feel like you actually...
Well, I was like, is that the name for it? Like, I never use like iTunes anymore, and I don't use Apple Podcasts, and I don't know what any of that ecosystem even is. And it's actually funny because I see like sometimes when people fill out sticker requests, we have this funny question of like, hey, have you reviewed us on? And they're like, I don't use Apple products. I was like, yeah, that's my people right there. Anyways, the other person who is our people is our awesome producer, Josh Crowhurst, who we can't go a show without thanking him for all he does for the podcast. So thank you, Josh. And remember, this is a tough topic, and you're not going to get it right every time. And guess what? The best thing about it is you get lots and lots of chances. And no one decision is going to make or break your career. And I know that it doesn't make it easier to make choices, but I know I speak for both of my co-hosts, Mo and Tim, when I say, no matter where you are in that process of choosing that next job, keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening. Let's keep the conversation going with your comments, suggestions, and questions on Twitter at @AnalyticsHour, on the web at analyticshour.io, our LinkedIn group, and the Measure Chat Slack group. Music for the podcast by Josh Crowhurst.
So smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics. Analytics don't work.
I love Venn diagrams. It's just something about those three circles and the analysis about where there is the intersection, right?
rock flag, and don't lie to yourself.
Nice.
I was struggling on that one. I was trying to figure out what the.
Good.
That was
I think that was a good one.
Yeah.
I mean, like a.
So I missed your last call
it was-
entirely because I was panicking. I was panicking about what it was going to be. No, I caught your last call.
You were fine. You were just fine.
I realized that I didn't have a rock flag, and right about as Michael was starting his last call, I was like, "Oh,
the wind up.
yeah."
Yeah. I know that feeling. It's like you get to the end of the show and you're like, do I really want to do this last call, or should I switch to something else?
I love that you guys have options. I have one. I have one option.
Oh, no.
every time.
A lot of times it's just one, but sometimes there's a couple of ideas I have, and then I'm like, I'm not sure. And then there's sometimes I have, like, I don't like any of them, and I don't know what to do.